Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series, Terminology in the Integral Yoga, Beauty, Part 1. Sri Aurobindo and Mother have spoken so beautifully on beauty that I have divided their talks into 3 parts. To begin from Sri Aurobindo. The highest aim of the aesthetic being is to find the divine through beauty. The highest art is that which, by an inspired use of significant and interpretive form, unseals the doors of the spirit, the human cycle. But great art is not satisfied with representing the intellectual truth of things, which is always their superficial or exterior truth. It seeks for a deeper and original truth, which escapes the eye of the mere sense or the mere reason. The soul in them, the unseen reality, which is not that of their form and process, but of their spirit, the human cycle. This is especially evident in the 2 realms which, in the ordinary scale of our powers, stand nearest to the reason, and on either side of it, the aesthetic and the ethical being, the search for beauty and the search for good. Man's seeking after beauty reaches its most intense and satisfying expression in the great creative arts, poetry, painting, sculpture, architecture. But in its full extension, there is no activity of his nature or his life from which it need or ought to be excluded, provided we understand beauty both in its widest and truest sense. A complete and universal appreciation of beauty and the making entirely beautiful our whole life and being must surely be a necessary character of the perfect individual and the perfect society. But in its origin, this seeking for beauty is not rational. It springs from the roots of our life. It is an instinct and an impulse, an instinct of aesthetic satisfaction and an impulse of aesthetic creation and enjoyment. From Social and Political Thought, Volume 15. Where the greatest and most powerful creation of beauty is accomplished, and its appreciation and enjoyment rise to the highest pitch, the rational is always surpassed and left behind. The creation of beauty in poetry and art does not fall within the sovereignty or even within the sphere of reason. The intellect is not the poet, the artist, the creator within us. Creation comes by a supra-rational influx of light and power, which must work always, if it is to do its best, by vision and inspiration. It may use the intellect for certain of its operations, but in proportion as it subjects itself to the intellect, it loses in power and force of vision and diminishes the splendor and truth of the beauty it creates. There have been periods of artistic creation, ages of reason, in which the rational and intellectual tendency has prevailed in poetry and art. There have been even nations which, in their great formative periods of art and literature, have set up reason and a meticulous taste as the sovereign powers of their aesthetic activity. At their best, these periods have achieved work of a certain greatness, but predominantly of an intellectual greatness and perfection of technique rather than achievements of a supreme, inspired, and revealing beauty. Indeed, their very aim has been not the discovery of the deeper truth of beauty, but truth of ideas and truth of reason, a critical rather than a true creative aim. Their leading object has been an intellectual criticism of life and nature, elevated by a consummate poetical rhythm and diction, rather than a revelation of God and man and life and nature in inspired forms of artistic beauty. But great art is not satisfied with representing the intellectual truth of things, which is always their superficial or exterior truth. It seeks for a deeper and original truth, which escapes the eye of the mere sense or the mere reason, the soul in them, the unseen reality, which is not that of their form and process, but of their spirit. This it seizes and expresses by form and idea, but a significant form, which is not merely a faithful and just or a harmonious reproduction of outward nature, and a revelatory idea, not the idea which is merely correct, elegantly right, or fully satisfying to the reason and taste. Always the truth it seeks is first and foremost the truth of beauty. Not again the formal beauty alone, or the beauty of proportion and right process, which is what the sense and the reason seek, but the soul of beauty, which is hidden from the ordinary eye and the ordinary mind, and revealed in its fullness, not only to the unsealed vision of the poet and artist in man, who can seize the secret significances of the universal poet and artist, the divine creator, who dwells as their soul and spirit in the forms he has created. All artistic work, in order to be perfect, must indeed have, in the very act of creation, the guidance of an inner power of discrimination, constantly selecting and rejecting in accordance with a principle of truth and beauty, which remains always faithful to a harmony, a proportion, an intimate relation of the forms to the idea. There is, at the same time, an exact fidelity of the idea to the spirit, nature, and inner body of the thing of beauty, which has been revealed to the soul and the mind. It's Swarupa and Swabhava. But as with the truth of religion, so with the highest and deepest truth of beauty, the intellectual reason cannot seize its inner sense and reality, not even the inner truth of the apparent principles and processes, unless it is aided by a higher insight, not its own. As it cannot give a method, process, or rule by which beauty can or ought to be created, so also it cannot give to the appreciation of beauty that deeper insight which it needs. It can only help to remove the dullness and vagueness of the habitual perceptions and conceptions of the lower mind, which prevent it from seeing beauty, or which give it false and crude aesthetic habits. It does this by giving to the mind an external idea and rule of the elements of the thing it has to perceive and appreciate. For the conscious appreciation of beauty reaches its height of enlightenment and enjoyment, not by analysis of the beauty enjoyed, or even by a right and intelligent understanding of it. These things are only a preliminary clarifying of our first unenlightened sense of the beautiful, but by an exaltation of the soul, in which it opens itself entirely to the light and power and joy of the creation. The soul of beauty in us identifies itself with the soul of beauty in the thing created, and feels in appreciation the same divine intoxication and uplifting which the artist felt in creation. What has been said of the great creative art, that being the form in which normally our highest and intensest aesthetic satisfaction is achieved, applies to all beauty, beauty in nature, beauty in life, as well as beauty in art. Social and Political Thought, Volume 15. Namaste.